Welcome to Civics in a Year, the podcast that makes civic literacy fast, accessible, and surprisingly engaging. In just 10 minutes an episode, we'll tackle one of 250 essential questions about American democracy, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to better understand your country and your rights, you're in the right place. Civics in a Year is powered by the Civic Literacy Curriculum from the Center for American Civics and is produced in partnership with the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University. Welcome back, everyone, to the Civics in a Year podcast. I am very excited today for two reasons. One, because we are joined by Dr. Colleen Sheehan, who is one of our professors here at the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership. And two, because it is on my favorite founder, James Madison. Dr. Sheehan, thank you so much for hopping on this call and talking about James Madison. So, Dr. Sheehan, the question is, who was James Madison? And why is he called the father of the Constitution?
Well, good to be here, Liz. And especially, it's fun to do this, isn't it? Because we're coming upon the 250th anniversary of this place we call the United States of America. And it's going to be what they call the semi-quincentennial, or 250
That's a mouthful.
Years. Yeah, for the next 11 years, because right now it's this next year is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And then we'll be leading up, of course, to the Articles of Confederation and then the Constitution. So James Madison is the one of all the founders that has been referred to as the father of the Constitution. Now, some scholars now say, well, he really doesn't deserve that title. But I would actually disagree with them. I think he does. The reason that some people say he doesn't deserve it is because he wanted some things at the Constitutional Convention. That's, of course, when they met in Philadelphia that long, hot summer of 1787 to draft the Constitution. And that there were some things he wanted that he didn't get. So they say, why should he be called the father of the Constitution when he didn't even get what he wanted? Well, here's the deal, I think. Madison, more than any of the other founders, and there were 55 of them who actually were delegates to the convention of 1787. And 33 of them at the end were there to the last day, September 17th. To decide whether to sign or not sign. Madison was the most prepared of any of them. He was a Virginian. He was a bachelor in his 30s. He spent the time in the months leading up to the convention really doing his homework. And he wrote a piece called Vices of the Political System of the United States. He wanted to know what were the weaknesses. Why weren't we doing as well as we had hoped for after we established our first Constitution under the Articles of Confederation? And things weren't that great, Liz, of course, as you know, because we were in a very poor economic situation. We were trying to pay back our war debts from the Revolutionary War and not doing a very good job of it, partly because inflation was so high. And our political situation was precarious. In 1786, right before the convention, in 1787, there was a rebellion of the farmers in Western Massachusetts called Shays' Rebellion. And I bet a lot of students know about this because the farmers couldn't pay their mortgages. And so they were being foreclosed and their farms were going to be taken away from them. And so they'd have to go to debtor's prison. Well, instead, they rebelled, and that had to be put down. So people were pretty unhappy. So Madison said, why is this? Why isn't this Constitution under the Articles working? And what can we do about it? Ultimately, he wrote some notes on that, went to the convention in Philadelphia very prepared with a plan. which one of the other delegates from Virginia, Edmund Randolph, essentially introduced as the Virginia Plan. And that became the plan to deal with. It set the agenda. It called for a stronger national government. It called for two houses of the legislature. It called for an executive and an independent judiciary. And the president under this new plan and the Congress under this new plan would have much more power than they did under the Articles of Confederation. So that's one of the reasons I think Madison is the father of the Constitution, that he actually was the one more than anybody else who thought through the problems of founding the United States and the new government under which we should live. And I think ultimately, I think Washington was the father of the country. I think Hamilton was the father of economics for the United States when he becomes Secretary of Treasury under Washington in the first administration. But it's Madison who thought through this small R Republican government and how to put this on paper and into practice.
So, Dr. Sheehan, we talk about the Virginia Plan, and I know that that's something that students learn about in school. And I know there's another plan, the New Jersey Plan. There's lots of compromise. Can you tell us a little bit more about Madison? And, he does all this work beforehand. And in my kind of reflection of Madison, he is one of the founders who is willing to listen, to have conversations, to kind of do more research and understanding of, the government and how to kind of change it. Do you feel like, we talk about the founding fathers, that he was kind of the most studious and really wanting to have an understanding of how things work in order to write this new Constitution?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Liz. I think he was both a political figure, or let's say statesman, and a scholar. Madison was a real scholar. He was very quiet. In fact, he often had to be asked to speak up in public debate. So much so that one Frenchman, when writing home, called him Mr. Mutterson. But he was shy. He was shy. He was quiet. He liked his books. They were important to him. When he went to Philadelphia, he packed his books. Probably more books than clothes, because clothes, he wasn't exactly what we'd call a fashionista these days. He always wore black. He always dressed in black. And so, Madison was a statesman and a scholar. And here's one of the things that I think is most important to know both about our country and about Madison. In 1787, when he was thinking this all through, one of the things that he understood very well, and the other founders understood, was that government by the people had never really worked before in the history of the world. Imagine that. Something we're so used to today that we call democracy, or small r republicanism, popular government, in other words. It had never worked before. It never really been successful. I mean, there were very, short moments of success, so much so that Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers, and I probably should just say a note on that, the Federalist Papers were written by three people, though they all signed it Publius, because they didn't want people to know who wrote it for a while, because they didn't want people to judge it based on whether they liked you or didn't like you. But as Madison said in one of them, it matters not from whom the advice comes, but whether the advice be good. And so they wrote these Federalist Papers and signed them Publius. And in one of them, Hamilton said that he talked about those petty republics of ancient Greece and Italy. that while they sometimes dazzle us with a fleeting brilliance, they remind us that popular government has never really worked. It's just momentary rays of glory breaking forth from the gloom, Hamilton says. And so it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, Hamilton wrote in the first Federalist paper, to decide the important question, whether or not societies of men are capable of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they're forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. That was the challenge that Madison and the other founders faced. Could we find a way, for the first time in human history, to make government of and by and for the people a success? Could the people actually govern themselves? That was the challenge. They called it the Great Experiment in Self-Government.
I love that you bring up the Federalist Papers, because our next section, we're kind of doing a deep dive into the Federalist Papers. Can I ask, and I hope that I'm not putting you too on the spot with this, because it might be a hard question to answer. Of Madison's writings, do you have a favorite that you feel really kind of encapsulates him as a statesman, as somebody who, likes books and enjoys the research kind of part of these things?
Just how about I name a couple or some favorites?
Perfect.
I like the opening. It's the at the beginning of Federalist 39, he talks about, is this new government strictly small r Republican? And he says something to the effect, well, yes, it is. No other form of government would be reconcilable with the genius of the American people, or with the spirit of the revolution, or with that honorable determination that the people of America feel to rest all our political experiments on the capacity of mankind for self-government. That was the challenge, and I think that really captures what drove Madison, what made him tick. He was a believer in his fellow citizens and in showing to ourselves and to the world that, yes, the people can govern themselves. So that passage is a favorite. I really like Federalist 49. I really like Federalist 51. Those are favorites. In Federalist 51, he says, justice is the end of government. It is the end of civil society. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until it be obtained, or until liberty be lost in its pursuit. I like that. And his little short piece that he published in the National Gazette in 1791 called Public Opinion. That's another favorite, which he says, public opinion sets bounds to every government and is the real sovereign in every free one. In other words, he means the people really do rule. All of these things that we set up through separation of powers and checks and balances and representation, all of those things are important, but they're not meant to stop the people from governing. They're meant to, as an assist. It's like an assist in basketball. You can't do it on your own. We need each other. And so the idea is that in the end, though, it's those guys calling the shots, so to speak. And that's what Madison, his plan was meant to do, that he outlined and was fairly successful in accomplishing in terms of the Philadelphia Convention.
Thank you for giving us a couple. Go ahead.
Just one other thing, the Constitution never says separation of powers. It never says checks and balances. But if you read it carefully, and it's worth reading, it's not that long and it's worth reading, you can see in it not only a design, but a purpose. Our Constitution has a purpose. And I think that purpose is to provide a framework so that the people can govern themselves. And what does that mean? Not just that they make decisions. Yes, it means that they make decisions, but they make decisions based on justice, so that we can live with each other in a way that's a decent way of life, a good way of life. And so politics sometimes seems like a nasty and dirty business. And for sure, sometimes it is. And too often it is. Sure, that's all true. But it's also, politics is a noble pursuit, or at least it should be, and it can be. And it can be with the right kinds of leadership, with the right kind of statesmen and stateswomen who understand that the purpose of politics is to ennoble us, to help us live in such a way that makes life worth living. And you know this, Liz, we teach and work at a place called the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University. And that leadership is not there for no reason at all. It's there because that whole idea of leadership, of good political leadership or statesmanship, does have this purpose. And we want to think about these things with others and in our classes, so that this place we call America is a place, worth living in.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you gave us lots of sorry. I'm so glad you gave us lots of different things to read for Madison. And, I've been to DC so many times, Dr. Sheehan, and I've always said, how come Madison doesn't have a monument? And I know that he has, the building of the Library of Congress. And hearing you talk about him, it feels like that is the perfect nod to this founding father, is to have, a building that is the Library of Congress, where people still go to do research and really dig into these things. So, Dr. Sheehan, thank you so much for your time. Listeners, all of the readings that Dr. Sheehan mentioned, I will make sure to link in our notes. We will have episodes on Federalist 10, Federalist 39, and Federalist 51 that also mentions 49 and 50 in it, upcoming in our September kind of Constitution. But Dr. Sheehan, I feel like I could talk to you forever about James Madison, because he is truly, I've always found him so fascinating. I find Dolly Madison very fascinating. He was just such a quiet founder in comparison to a Hamilton. So I really appreciate your time and expertise.
Sure, Liz. And thanks very much. And good luck with this.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Civics in a Year. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about a constitutional republic as much as you do. For more episodes, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at civics.asu.edu. Make sure to check out the show notes for any relevant links. Special thanks to the United States Marine Band for their performance of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's keep building a stronger constitutional republic, one episode at a time.